Out of every illustration in my Washington, D.C. chapter, this one might be the one that surprised me the most. It isn't a speech, a ceremony, or a historic event. It's simply a dad reading a bedtime story, and that's exactly why I love it. When I first planned this spread, I almost drew another inauguration scene. Then I realized I already had one. If I had another formal ceremony, readers would essentially be seeing the same kind of moment twice. So I asked myself a simple question. What makes a first family different from just a president? The answer was obvious. They're still a family. Instead of another official event, I wanted to show what happens after the cameras are gone and the workday is over. This scene takes place in the White House residence late at night. Anden has the kind of day every president experiences. He signed executive orders, answered difficult questions from reporters, attended meetings, and made decisions that affect millions of people. By the time he walks upstairs, he's mentally exhausted. Then, his 4-year-old daughter, Felicity, appears with her favorite storybook and asks if he'll read it to her. He doesn't hesitate. He smiles, sits down, and says yes. That single decision tells you more about who Anden is than another speech ever could. I want to spend a few minutes talking about Anden because I think he's one of the most misunderstood characters if you only look at him through the lens as Mr. President. When most people picture a president, they imagine someone standing behind a podium, signing bills, giving speeches, or answering questions from reporters. And yes, Anden does all those things. That's part of his job as being president. But that's only one side of him. When he walks into the White House residence at the end of the day, he isn't thinking about titles or camera anymore. He is simply daddy. One detail I imagined while drawing this page was that his wrist would be sore. After a full day of signing executive orders, writing notes, shaking countless hands, and making difficult decisions, he's physically and mentally drained. Most people would probably want nothing more than to collapse into bed after taking a couple aspirins. Instead, his 4-year-old daughter walks up with her favorite storybook and asks, "Daddy, can you read this?" Without hesitation, he smiles, lifts her onto his lap, and begins reading. He doesn't just read the words either. Every animal gets its own voice. The bear gets a deep growl. The little duck gets an exaggerated squeak. He commits completely to every page because in that moment, making his daughter laugh matters more than how tired he feels. To me, that's what makes Anden a good father. He's present. Aurora has heard the story more times than she could count, yet she still leans against him because that's where she feels safe. Anden Jr. is completely absorbed in building his model Artemis rocket, but Anden never tells him to put it away. He understands that spending time together doesn't always mean everyone should be doing the same thing. Sometimes, simply sharing the same room is enough. That's something I wanted this illustration to capture. Leadership doesn't end when Anden leaves the Oval Office, but fatherhood doesn't end when he walks into it either. He carries both responsibilities every day, and he takes each one very seriously. To the country, he's Mr. President. To his children, he's the daddy who reads bedtime stories, invents silly voices for woodland animals, and makes time for them no matter how demanding the day has been. I think that tells us more about Anden's character than any speech or press conference could ever do. Now, let's talk about the youngest member of the family, Felicity. Felicity is 4 years old, and I wanted her to represent the joy and innocence that children naturally bring into a home. Even one as famous as the White House. She's cheerful, energetic, and endlessly curious. She's the kind of little girl who asks why about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do Secret Service agents wear earpieces? Why do cookies have to cool before you can eat them? She wants to understand the world around her, and I think that's one of the sweetest parts of her personality. Another little detail I imagined is that she never wears shoes unless someone reminds her. If she's in the White House residence, she's usually running around barefoot or wearing fuzzy ankle socks. It's simply what feels most comfortable to her. Since she's the president's daughter, people from around the country occasionally send her thoughtful gifts: stuffed animals, little dresses, handmade blankets, children's books, and many more. She's still too young to fully understand why people send them, but every package feels like a surprise. She gets excited to open each one, and afterward, her parents help her write thank you notes to the people who took the time to think of her. One of my favorite moments involving Felicity is the time that the news crew asked to film her doing a White House baking video. The White House chefs helped her make chocolate chip cookies for the nation. She was wearing an oversized chef's coat that nearly reaches her ankles, with the sleeves rolled up many times, and they also gave her a giant chef's hat that keeps slipping down over her eyes. When it's time to introduce the recipe, she proudly announces, "We're making Chokawit Chip Cookies." She can't quite pronounce chocolate yet. Nobody corrects her. That moment is simply too adorable, and before long, Chokawit Chip Cookies becomes the phrase that everyone remembers from the video. But my favorite part of Felicity isn't the cookies, it's bedtime. No matter how demanding Anden's day has been, she still walks up carrying her favorite storybook and asks if he'll read it one more time. She doesn't see the President of the United States, she sees her daddy. And when he starts making funny voices for every animal in the story, she laughs as if she's hearing them for the very first time. That's what I wanted Felicity to represent. She reminds everyone, including Anden, that life isn't made up only of meetings, schedules, and responsibilities. Sometimes, the most meaningful moments are the simplest. Sometimes, the most important thing happening in the White House isn't a press conference or a state dinner. Sometimes, it's just a little girl asking her dad to read one more story before bed. Now let's talk about the oldest member of the family, Aurora. At 12 years old, Aurora is probably the quietest member of the Caelren family. She's thoughtful, very mature for her age, and happiest when she has a good book in her hands. When she has a free afternoon, there's a good chance you'll find her tucked away somewhere in the White House library, completely absorbed in whatever she's reading. I like to imagine the librarians know her by name. They probably even set aside books they think she'd enjoy because she's there so often. Books don't feel like homework to Aurora. They're adventures. While other kids ask for the newest toys, Aurora is just excited about bringing home another novel. Even so, there's one childhood tradition she hasn't outgrown. She still sleeps with her stuffed bear that's almost as big as her torso. I love that little detail because it reminds us that despite how mature she seems, she's still only 12 years old. One of my favorite parts of this illustration is that she leans against Anden when she reads. She's heard this story more times than she can possibly count. She already knows every page. She knows every silly voice that he's about to do. But she isn't listening because she's curious about the ending. She's listening because that's where she feels safe. There's something comforting about sitting beside your dad at the end of a long day, hearing a familiar story while the rest of the room goes quiet. Sometimes, comfort isn't about the story, it's about the person reading it. Aurora also has a naturally gentle heart. She's the kind of older sister who quietly notices when someone feels left out and makes sure they're included without drawing attention to herself. She doesn't need to be the loudest in the room. She doesn't need attention. Her kindness speaks for itself. Even though her father is the President of the United States, that's not who she thinks about when she's sitting beside him at home. To Aurora, he's simply Dad. He's the man she's leaned against since she was little. The one who reads bedtime stories, invents ridiculous voices for woodland animals, and somehow makes one of the most famous houses in the world feel warm and ordinary. I think that's one of my favorite things about her character. No matter how important the world says Anden is, Aurora reminds that inside this home, he's simply a father and spending the evening with people he loves. Now let's talk about the mother in the family, Martha. If Anden is the face of the administration, Martha is the heart of the family. She's never been someone who seeks attention, and she's perfectly content letting Anden stand behind the podium while she quietly supports the people she loves. That doesn't mean she's passive, quite the opposite. Her strength simply shows itself in quieter ways. One detail I wanted to capture in this illustration is Martha winding down with a warm cup of tea, watching her family spend time together. She isn't distracted by a phone or thinking about tomorrow's schedule. She's simply enjoying the moment. I think that's something we sometimes forget. Love doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's simply found in being present. As I imagined this scene, I pictured Martha watching Anden read to Felicity and thinking, he must be so mentally exhausted and sore after everything he did today, and he's still making time to read to my little girl. That small thought tells you about who Martha is. She notices the sacrifices that often go unseen. She pays attention to the little things. Even though the White House has professional chefs, she enjoys cooking dinner from time to time, not because she has to, but it's one of the ways she shows love to her family. Acts of service come naturally to her. She's also incredibly observant. If Felicity is starting to get sleepy, Martha notices. If Aurora has a difficult day, she notices. If Anden Jr. proudly finishes a complicated model, she's the first to admire it. She has a gift for making people feel seen. That quiet attentiveness is one of her greatest strengths. The White House can be an incredibly busy place filled with meetings, schedules, reporters, and constant activity. But when the family gathers together in the evening, Martha helps turn it back into a home. I wanted this illustration to remind people of that. For 8 years, the White House isn't just where a president lives. It's where this family laughs together, shares meals, reads bedtime stories, drinks tea, celebrates milestones, and enjoys ordinary evenings with one another. I think Martha is the big reason why it feels that way. She may not be the loudest person in the room, but she doesn't need to be. Her kindness, attentiveness, and quiet devotion speak louder than words ever could. Now, let's talk about Anden Jr. At 9 years old, he's the kind of kid who's always moving. If I had to describe him in just one word, it would be driven. He loves being on track team. Running isn't something his parents encourage him to do just because it's healthy. He genuinely enjoys pushing himself to run a little faster than he did yesterday. He's always looking for the next challenge. Because he's so active, he's surprisingly strong for his age. Every now and then, someone tries carrying something heavy, and before they know it, Anden Jr. has already picked it up and started helping. People sometimes stop and think, wait, how did a 9-year-old carry that heavy suitcase? He isn't trying to impress anyone. Helping simply comes naturally for him. But I didn't want him to be known only as an athletic kid, so I gave him another passion that's completely different. He loves building models. Not the simple kits that most people expect a 9-year-old to enjoy. He's drawn to the enormous engineering sets that are usually marketed towards adults. The model Artemis space launch system in this illustration is a perfect example. It contains thousands of pieces. That's exactly why he wanted it. He enjoys solving problems. He's patient, organized, and methodical. Even before he begins building, he'll spend time studying the instruction manual and sorting every piece into neat little groups so everything is exactly where it belongs. If someone asks whether his dad helped him build a rocket for him, he'd probably smile and say, "No, Dad just helped me find the one piece that rolled under the couch." He's proud of doing the work himself. One thing I especially like about this illustration is that Anden Jr. doesn't need to stop building to be part of the family moment. While Anden reads to Felicity, he's quietly working on his rocket nearby. Aurora is leaning against Dad. Felicity is curled up on his lap. Everyone is sharing the same evening, and even though each person is doing something a little different. I think that's a realistic picture of family life. Being together doesn't always mean everyone is focused on the exact same activity. Sometimes it's enough to be in the same room, enjoying each other's company. To me, that's what makes Anden Jr. feel real. He's athletic, he's curious, he enjoys solving difficult problems, and even at 9 years old, he isn't afraid to tackle something challenging simply because other people think he's too young. Now, I want to talk about something that people might not notice right away: the room itself. When you're drawing a family scene like this, it's easy to think of the furniture and decorations as nothing more than background details, but I wanted every part of this room to help tell a story. This isn't just a living room, it's the White House residence. At the same time, I didn't want it to feel like a museum. The president's family actually lives here. Children run through the hallways, books are left on tables, blankets get tossed over the couch, and people kick off their shoes after a long day. My goal was to make the room feel elegant without losing the warmth of a family home. One of the first things you'll notice is the large window looking out into the night. That was important to me because it creates an interesting contrast. Outside, the nation's business never really stops. Somewhere, people are still working late, reporters are preparing for tomorrow's stories, and the city continues moving. Inside, everything has become quiet. A father is reading a bedtime story. I love that contrast because it reminds that even in one of the busiest homes in America, there's still peaceful moments at the end of the day. You'll also notice the portrait of a past president hanging on the wall. There, that isn't there simply as decoration. It's a quiet reminder that generations of presidents have lived and worked within these walls. History surrounds this family every day. The bookshelves were another detail I enjoyed designing. They helped the room feel warm and welcoming rather than formal. Since Aurora loves reading, I like imagining that some of the books have spent time in her room before eventually finding their way back onto the shelves. The lighting was another intentional choice. I wanted the entire scene to feel calm. The meetings are over, the schedules are finished, the cameras have gone home. What's left is a family enjoying a quiet evening together. That peaceful atmosphere was one of the most important parts of the illustration. One thing I especially wanted to avoid was making the White House feel intimidating. When people think of this building, they usually picture politics, ceremonies, important meetings, and historic decorations. All of those things certainly happen here, but families also spend up to 8 years here too. Children build models on the floors, parents read bedtime stories, someone probably forgets to fold a blanket now and then. Those ordinary moments are every bit as real as the historic ones. In many ways, that's what the entire illustration is about. It's a reminder that behind one of the most recognizable addresses in the world is still a family living everyday life together. For 8 years, this remarkable house isn't just the home of the Mr. President. For the Caelrens, it's simply home. And I think that's the message I wanted readers to take away from this illustration more than anything else. History may happen within these walls, but so do bedtime stories. And sometimes those quiet family moments tell us just as much as the people who live here as any speech or ceremony or headline ever could. This is the final drawing. I hope you enjoyed listening to the story, and please like and subscribe. See you later.